is 6:30, so we will call the Whitestown BZA meeting to order. Everybody can stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I apologize, I didn't check up top if you're all right. We're good. Thank you. Jill, roll call.
Andrew McGee.
Here.
Mark Pascarella.
Here.
Philip Snowberger.
Here.
Craig Arthur.
Here. Okay. First item, approval of the agenda and meeting minutes. Are there any changes to the agenda?
Mr. President, I move that we approve the agenda as presented, as well as the meeting minutes for November 4th, 2021.
I'll second. So first and second, any further discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion passes 4-0. Are there any public requests to speak on topics not related to an agenda item? I do have people up here for the agenda item, but
No, we've received none.
okay. Any online? All right. And then I don't see any presentations or unfinished business. Still none. All right. So we move on to item 6A, docket BZA 21-009-UV at 202 South Main Street, use variance. Is the petitioner present?
Go ahead. Yeah, this is your time to present. Yes,
Okay.
sir.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for hearing us. Got a little presentation with an introduction and a few other items, talk about the building and the use in just a few minutes, and that's all it'll take.
If you could just state your name for the record.
Yes, thank you.
Thanks.
My name is Charlie Campbell. I live at 4820 West and 650 North near Thorntown, Indiana. And I'm here requesting a use variance on behalf of my daughter-in-law, Rochelle, and my son, Jesse Campbell. And a little bio about Rochelle. Rochelle has been in the hair salon business for a total of 17 years. And during that period has only moved one time from Zionsville to Carmel, where she now does business. She's rented space for all that time. And over the past, thank you. And over the past couple of years, Rochelle and Jesse started talking about and becoming educated in salon ownership and moving up and moving into a building of their own. And that's what started this process. Rochelle's been a lifelong resident of Boone County, grew up just a few miles east of us where we are right now, or in downtown Whitestown. And so after this process of sort of thinking about buying a building and starting her own place, the owner of 202 South Main Street, who my son Jesse hung around with in high school, who grew up there, got word to Jesse that that property, he might be able to buy it. And so Jesse and Rochelle looked into it and went on with the looks and the an offer, and it all happened. So I'm here really considering Jesse and I have been in the real estate business for several years, selling, remodeling, buying, leasing properties. And so we decided in this case, it might be better for our company, A. Campbell Properties, to actually purchase and own this property and lease it to Rochelle for a period of time that so it suits her. So in other words, it can be leased, she could be deeded to her at any time or whatever. It's not really going to be an investment property for us. It's going to be her property to own and manage. So some of the items that we believe need to be addressed at the property are both remodeling inside and out, the existing trees on the site, trash receptacles or trash removal, off-street parking, hours of operation, and signage. And I'll expand on those just a second. So for the remodeling part of it, for interior changes, we've not really decided yet for the exact changes. But when we do, we will, of course, submit any of those ideas to the town of Whitestown Planning Building Department, and also with the Division of Fire and Building Safety for the Indiana State Review. For the exterior, we will begin by stripping off, it's got vinyl siding on it. And it's really okay, but we really would like to get it back to a little of the more original look. And so we're going to strip that off and take a look at it and either repair the existing siding or replace it with something that would be painted or something a little more stylish. For the house, really for that particular house, there's not a style. This is really known as a four square. This is a simple four square structure, and really more talked about as a type rather than a style. I think that particular type of house can have a style, but it would take the owner to do that. So that's really, it's really kind of up for grab. And actually, I wanted you to see just a few of the different types of. Get this stuff right here. Jill, just the right and left arrow would do this. Okay. I'm sorry, I can't. Oh, here we go. So what I wanted to do is to give you some idea of some of the different styles that these four squares had taken on. And the unique thing about them is they're four squares. They're really four sides. They're all about the same size. They all have big front porches. They all have large windows. Very often they come up 3 or 4 blocks out of the ground, and so there's a few steps going inside. They almost all have dormers on them, like that one does. But the stylish part gets into those little, I don't think they're called corbels, but the little trim that goes around the soffit and some of that. So yeah, here's another one that just shows lighting as an accent. So another interesting thing about this that I like is that bandboard that goes around underneath the upstairs window. That gives you an opportunity to change styles of siding, change colors even. And that's not out of character with these. It's very common to do that with these four square buildings. There's another one that shows 2 different sides. Not a great looking house, but it shows 2 different kinds of siding. So there's kind of a shake shingle above and vertical siding below. And so here's another interesting, very, very plain four square. But the interesting thing, I thought about this when I was researching these, is this picture was taken in Hope, Arkansas. And this happens to be where Bill Clinton grew up for a period of his time. And I thought it was interesting that that was a little caveat in that whole business. Also, in regards to the style and the colors, if the Legacy Corps, if there's a group, Whitestown, for the Legacy Corps, if there's a style group or color group put together yet to do any of the colors for the downtown, we're more than happy to talk with them about helping us choose those types of things. I know some communities have those groups set up, and I assume you may if you don't. Another interesting thing about this four square is they were very affordable. They came out in the late 1800s and were popular for 20 or 30 years. And get back to this interesting picture. This particular house, this is a Sears and Roebuck page out of a Sears and Roebuck catalog. So you could have bought this package, which is very, very close to the one that we have, for $2,500. It would have been delivered on a train car. So, I mean, I think that's, you know, Amazon had nothing on these people back in the late 1800s. So, move on to trees here. And we have no intention of clear cutting. There's a few nice trees on that site, and there's absolutely no reason for us to cut down trees for the fun of cutting down trees. We will assess them, we'll look at them, and we're going to try to we'll try to do our parking around them if we can, but we have no intention of clear cutting trees. On this topic of trash, we'll store no trash on this site. There'll be no outdoor trash cans. We'll remove trash daily. There just really won't be much there. On to parking. I think it's not showing up all that great, but I think you can see that the ADA, which is the lower portion of that, is really the north of the property, and that's exactly where Turner Street is. And so the way we've got it proposed right now is 6 parking spaces on the south side of the sidewalk, and you would simply pull into them from the street. What this does is gives us a starter of 6 parking spots with one ADA spot, and the opportunity to add more parking in the backyard. Another thing that's kind of hard to see, if you've been to this site at all, there's a fence, there's a little white vinyl fence that goes around it. And this survey, which we did hire a surveyor to go and do this, it shows that little white fence is actually outside our property line. So it's really on the neighbors to the south, which is a church property. So, you know, we're going to deal with all that. We won't be suggesting any off-site parking unless we go through a formal arrangement for that. But anyway, the main point here is that there's plenty of room here for 6 spots, and there's room to add some if we need to, and jockey around some trees. So hours of operation will be set at from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. Monday through Friday, and from 8 until 3 on Saturdays, and will not be open on Sundays. Under the topic of signage, Rochelle doesn't need to advertise her business, so a large sign for the purpose of drawing or attracting customers will not be proposed. However, some signage will be needed for this site. We will need signage that will help direct first-time client visits, and some directional signage for parking and ADA and all of those things, entrance doors and things like that. So again, we know that signage is a tricky business. We'll put a signage plan together, and we'll present it to the planning department as well. We won't buy signs and then ask for forgiveness. 5 standards for evaluating a use variance. The first one is approval not to be injurious to the public health, safety, morals, and general welfare of the community, because we will be a clean use. There'll be no noise. There'll be no immoral behavior, excessive trash, outdoor storage, and will produce no adverse conditions for the public utility system. Number 2 is the use and value of the area adjacent to the property included in the use variance will not be affected in a substantially adverse manner, because we will be improving the physical condition of the property. It will be maintained and considered, it will be a family-oriented business, so there'll be no adverse effect. The use variance arises from the condition peculiar to the property involved and is more clearly described as a hair salon instead of what is zoned as a single-family residence. The strict application of the terms of the zoning ordinance will constitute an unnecessary hardship if applied to the property for which the variance is sought, and is more clearly described as a hair salon instead of a single-family residence, although it is common use in many residential districts. A hair salon is clearly a business, and to operate legally, a use variance is needed. And although 202 South Main Street is in a residential zoning district, the majority of uses in the area are not residential. The approval does not interfere substantially with the comprehensive plan because there are very few residential uses in the immediate area of this building. The comprehensive plan and the legacy core plan clearly promote mixed use development along Main Street. That's all I've got to say, and thank you very much for hearing me. And thank you especially to Jill and all of the folks, Lori and everybody at the plant. They were very kind, very helpful to me. If you hear that or not, very helpful.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Staff report.
The applicant is requesting a use variance to permit a retail sales and service and repair use for the purpose of operating a hair salon. The site is located at 202 South Main Street in the Legacy Core. The site is zoned R3, which is a medium-density residential zoning district, and does not permit retail uses, including hair salons. The applicant is proposing to keep the existing structure and have a dumpster enclosure on the south side of the site. The applicant is proposing 5 standard parking stalls and 1 ADA stall off of Turner Street. Staff is providing a favorable recommendation to approve the use variance under docket BZA 21-009-UV. Staff finds the use will not be injurious to the public health, safety, morals, and general welfare because similar uses are located in the general vicinity. Staff finds the use and value of the area will not be negatively affected because although the use is commercial in nature, the physical structure of the building is residential in appearance and will not negatively detract from adjacent properties. The strict application of the terms of the zoning ordinance constitute an unnecessary hardship because uses directly to the north are zoned for commercial, and this is a natural continuation of the commercial uses. The approval does not interfere substantially with the comprehensive plan. The legacy core land use designation in the comp plan encourages investment in commercial redevelopment and infill projects.
Thank you. I will open this item for public comments for or against. I do have 3 in front of me. And then if anybody else did want to speak and you have not filled out a form when you entered, please fill out that form and hand it to Lori sitting over here. And if you're online and you want to speak, you can certainly message and we will get to you. I'll start with the list I have here in front of me. First up is Sharon Fisk. Please approach the podium. As a reminder, please state your name and address.
Sure. My name is Sharon Fisk. I live at 203 South Bowers Street, and I will be affected by this hair salon. We were told Newtown was a family business. It would close at 9 p.m. on the weekdays and not be a burden to residents. This is a lie. For 1 minute, I want each of you to think about what it's like on a Thursday night when you're trying to go to sleep because you have to get up early the next morning to go to work. It's 10:30 and the band's playing. The last set is at full speaker volume to almost 11 o'clock at night. Then all the people coming out of the business, they're clicking their cars, they're beeping, they're slamming their car doors, vehicle doors, they're beeping on the horns, beeping at one another at celebration, partying in the parking lot, revving their engines and peeling out down the road. It's now midnight. Would you like it? Would you like to live next to that business? I don't like it. And now you want to put in more cars, more flooding, add more noise, slamming car doors, people clicking their cars, activating their alarms. Someone bumps their car, the alarm goes sounding off, beep, 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 till finally someone comes out and turns it off. There's cars racing down Main Street to turn on Turner Street to get to the parking at Newtown. So now you're going to add these 6 parking spaces along Turner Street. So they'll be backing out onto Turner as people will be turning down Turner, causing more wrecks. And what I fear is that they're going to be T-boning them. They're going to go through my fence and hit my dog or my children playing in my yard. And I don't like it. It's going to be a disaster. You're asking for more car wrecks and more hardship to the residents, and I beg to differ. That corner at South Bowers and Turner Street is all residents. Most of us are senior citizens, we're elderly, some retired. These were our forever homes in a nice, quiet neighborhood, and you're ruining it by adding more commercial properties around us and squeezing us out. Homes in Boone Meadows are $400,000. We can't afford to move. With all the commercial development, now our property values will go down. Nobody wants to live next to a hair salon and a beer joint. Who's going to buy my property now? An investor will come in, lowball offer, bulldoze the house, and make it a parking lot or another business. But that's not going to help me. And it's not going to help the other senior citizens that live in that immediate vicinity. This totally upsets me. Operating a business from your home is not legal in many towns. The proposed business owners did not meet with any of the neighbors to discuss this. I personally went and knocked on doors. None of my neighbors around the streets here knew anything about this meeting. They didn't know that the house was being converted, and they were opposed to it. We already have a hair salon on one corner. So what's next? She's going to lease the property, then she's going to move. What next? Should we put another Papa John's? How would Whitestown Pizza King like that? It makes no sense. And they say, oh, well, we're not going to have trash. Well, you've got hair cutting, they put extension, fake hair in, they use chemicals, dye. Okay, the chemicals leach out, get on the ground, the sun dries it out, it becomes dust particles, the wind blows, so now it's blowing on my vegetable garden, it's blowing in my face, and I'm breathing it in. They're gonna have to cut down some of the trees to make that parking lot, and if they expand the parking lot, they're gonna put in more parking, so it's concrete, or maybe it's gravel. The trees, one tree can absorb over 11,000 gallons of water. So when those mature trees are in full bloom, they help to absorb the rainwater. And if any of you lived over here off of Main Street where I live on Turner and South Bowers, you would know that it's become a lake and it floods with a simple rain. So now you're going to take out trees, you're going to put in a parking lot. Where's that water going to go? It's going to go down Turner Street and flood it. And when the cars are trying to get to Moontown, it pushes the water up into my yard, and my yard is flooded. I spent thousands of dollars putting in trees along the Moontown. I built the fence. I put in trees to block the water from coming off of Moontown where they raised their parking lot. Now you're going to put another parking lot over here. I don't have another $10,000 for more trees. I can't afford more field dirt. I mean, it's pretty sad that Green Cycle knows me on a first name basis, where I keep having to buy dirt and try to fill in my property. It's not fair. It's not fair. We already suffer from Moontown flushing cleaning wipes down the drain. When they're sanitizing, the sewer mains were so clogged, I spent thousands of dollars. I had 2 plumbing companies and the very city of Whitestown come out. The entire sewer main was clogged with cleaning wipes or some type of baby wipe. And where it was so clogged, it was pushing it up my sewer main, causing a backup under my house. Now you're going to put in another commercial building. That house is not meant for commercial. It was meant for a single family residential. There's severe flooding. It needs to be addressed. If they chop down the trees, that acts as a barrier for the noise on Main Street. It also helps to purify the air for all the carbon monoxide. They're going to have to cut it down to build the parking lot. Now you're going to have more pollution in the area. And I'm the one, my family is going to have to breathe it. I'm opposed to it. I just don't think it's right to put another hair salon or make it a home into a commercial business. People are just a day, in one day, people run the stop sign. The cars are speeding. There's road rage. They fight for limited parking. They lay on their horns. People trying to back out. People trying to come down, almost hitting one another, beeping their horns. If there's not enough parking, they park in your yard, right up your yard. They throw trash, beer bottles. You hear the slamming of the vehicles, people constantly activating their locks. It's a noise. The car alarms being set off, then they're trying to disable it, people yelling. It's not a place. And the worst part is the beanbags, throwing the beanbags for the cornhole. So there's
ma'am,
just a lot of noise.
I'm just going to stop you for a moment. For the BZA meeting, we allow 20 minutes during the public session, and we allow 3 minutes per, or sorry, 5
Well,
minutes per
he
person.
spoke more than 3 minutes, but
Well, there's other people that are here to speak as well.
I'm opposed to it, and I wish you would consider. This is not what the residential, I spoke to the neighbors, and they were not in favor of a hair salon, and none of them knew about it. That's not fair to the people that live in the immediate area.
Thank you. Next up, I have, and I apologize if I'm saying it wrong, but it looks like Reg Her. Will you please state your name and your address for the record?
Yes. My name is Reginald Herm at 203 South Bowers.
Yeah, and I'll just remind, we have 20 minutes total, so
Mr. President, how much time has elapsed for
we have already had
demonstrators?
9 minutes.
Okay, so just 11 minutes between you and then the next person that'd like to speak. If you could just be kind about their time as well, because they want time as well to speak.
And I apologize, I didn't state that prior to the discussions.
Okay. Well, my main question is I walked the site this afternoon, and the biggest problem we have on Turner is the drainage. The city came out 2 weeks ago, tried to run the lines. They actually had a vac truck out there sucking all the water out because the water wasn't draining for 4 days. So you got one on Turner that's blocked, and they don't even know which direction it goes. You've got two there on Bowers, actually 3 that are on Bowers that are blocked, and 2 of them are actually caved in. We were told 2 weeks ago that the city was going to come out this week and put in the new storm sewer to alleviate the issue. Nobody showed up yet. So now you're going to put another parking lot, and I don't see how you could put parking spaces on that side, on Turner's side on that house, because you're going to go over the sidewalk, and I thought we were all wanting to have sidewalks in the city. Now you're going to take that. I don't see how you can have enough space there with the city street there and then trying to get a parking spot in there. I don't see where the room is available there. Okay? There's no drainage, no drain on that property at all for any kind of storm sewer. So I don't know what's going on there, because if you put a parking lot, we're going to have more flooding going on.
Sir, can I ask who you were speaking to? Was it someone within the streets department that you were speaking to in Whitestown regarding the
Yeah, it was
sewer?
Whitestown. Whitestown's been out there on that street for,
Do you know can you give me a name of who you've been speaking with so I'm happy to follow up with them?
I can't remember the name.
Okay. I'm happy to follow up with the streets department on that.
I think it was the Public Works, because
Okay.
we've been emailing back and forth pictures when it floods.
Yep.
And they come out, and so it's just been a ring around the rosy type of deal. So that's the big problem there. So now you also have the issue of that elevation is higher on that property. Moontown's higher than our property, and the street's higher. So now all the water is flooding this way. And so that's a major concern, that if you put more concrete or rock, where's the water going to go? Okay, and that's pretty much the main thing is you got to do something about the drainage, because it's a major problem right now. Okay, thanks.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. And next up, Mark, it's like Robinson.
Mark Robinson, 11275 East 300 South, Zionsville. I pretty much grew up in that little town until I was 7. My father was the principal of the Moon Town now, which I can understand. You live next to the Moon Town, how that could be a hindrance. But Charlie Campbell and his son Jesse do an excellent job on every project they do. So impressive to see him take an old house and make it new, follow all the standards, follow all the codes, and just make it look really nice. It's going to make the town a much better place as far as parking and noise and discarding trash. I don't think there'll be any problem. Right now, she works in a salon suite where the trash, goes into a container and it's dispersed properly, which this will be too. I own Indies Pro Graphics in Whitestown and a couple other buildings in Whitestown, and we are very proud of that little town and the way it's been growing. And I don't see why this would be any different. Christine's Hair Salon, I've had several people say, is there a hair salon in Whitestown? It's been there for 15 years. They drive right by it, they don't even know it's there. She has 3, 4 parking places. There's always cars there. There's never a problem. So she is my daughter, but I also know the Campbells and how they do their houses, and I think it'll be amazing for the town. And as far as the drainage, I know the town's been working on it. We had a little drainage problem over by my business at 104 Peter Street, and they were on it. It took them a while to get to it, but they got to it. And it drains really nice now, and I know they're working on all the drainage in town. So they can do so much, but I know they're working on it, so. And that's all I have.
Appreciate the feedback.
I thank you.
All right, is there anyone else in the room that would like to speak? Is there anyone online that's requested to speak while we're going? Okay. We will close the public portion of the meeting. Is there any, this is your chance as the petitioner, is there any closing remarks you'd like to make? You have 5 minutes if you.
Really, about the parking, I guess, I think it's important to note that this little site doesn't have any parking, period. If it remains a residential property or becomes a two resident property, there is no parking for the site. So at some point, someone's got to deal with parking on this site, regardless who does it. I think the owners have been parking next door forever. I'm not sure if at some point maybe they lost some front parking or something and started parking next door, but they just park simply to the south, and they always have. So I guess that's my point, is that we may not want to deal with parking, but someone's got to deal with it sometime. So,
thank you, sir.
Okay. Discussion on the BZA.
Yeah, there's just a couple things I'd like to, I guess, address from the conversations that's happened up to this point. I'd like to emphasize the fact to the remonstrators that this is a use variance. This is not a rezone. And the current property, if I'm not mistaken, is zoned R3. Is that correct? With that being zoned R3, there's a maximum permitted lot coverage of 60%. The petitioner is requesting 38%. So someone could come in today and put in even more parking, despite any sort of use variance because of how it's zoned. So if zoning is the problem, I suggest that that's fought separately. The second item that I'd like to address is I think it's a little bit unfair to come and remonstrate against a potential small business when displaying facts about a business that's entirely unrelated. Moontown is entirely unrelated to this property. And I think that it doesn't help anyone to discuss any other properties unless you're talking about properties that may be similar. Again, every remonstrator, everyone is entitled to their opinion, but I'd just like to state that from my perspective, I don't think Moontown has anything to do with this property.
You don't mind if I jump in?
Yeah.
I was going to add that anyway. I think a discussion about Moontown is long past. If there's issues with code enforcement or laws being broken, I think that's an issue for code enforcement or Whitestown PD. So I agree that the topic of this discussion is use variance that's before us, not Moontown.
And I think the last point I'd like to address is there's not been a single data point. I work at a tech company, I'm a data guy. There's not been a single data point that's shown me that any of the improvements or developments that have happened in Legacy Core to date have made the property values decline. So I'm happy to be corrected on that, but at least from what I've seen and the sales data that's coming out from in the field, I have not seen that. So with that, those are the comments that I have. I have no questions or follow-up for the petitioner.
I do have one question. As far as the use variance request is for retail, is this correct? Retail services?
The use variance will be for the hair salon. We just categorized it as a use that's in there. So say in 2 years, for some reason, the hair salon is no longer in existence. If it's approved today, a new use would have to get a new use variance. Even
Okay,
if it's
I just wanted to make sure that was clear, that this would be the only use that is approved, that it's not, because in discussion, you said you're leasing it, so if you were to leave and another business come in, that it would have to be a hair salon, otherwise they would have to come before the BZA again.
even if it was a different hair salon.
Oh, even if it's a different hair
establishment,
salon.
you'd have to get a new use variance. That is correct. Yeah.
Okay.
And I had one other follow-up question kind of regarding that. If this variance is approved, does that exclude the property from being used as residential at the same time as a business?
It's a good question. I suppose that if you're concerned that they're going to use it as a residence and a hair salon, and you don't want that to happen, I would suggest you make that a condition to your approval, which you guys can make reasonable conditions. If you want it to be continued to allowed, then I would say we make a condition there as well, just so it's clear, whichever way you want to go.
So I guess directed to the petitioner, is there any intent to use this property as a residence as well?
We've certainly not talked about this. This has really been something that Rochelle is going to deal with. As I said, we intend to buy the property, and we'll do the renovations and hand it over to her. But to be honest, I'd hate to have that condition put on it. There's so many bed and breakfasts and so many opportunities out there nowadays. I'd hate to, unless it's just a deal breaker, of course. I'd hate to put that restriction on it if we can keep from it.
Yeah, I think at least my opinion for the board is that I feel like as a small business owner, it can be really difficult to, if you have an opportunity to live and work from your property. I think that especially for a small business owner, it would be beneficial for the business owner to have the potential of living in the property. I think from maintaining a business moving forward, I think that could only help keep businesses in Whitestown if that were, that's my opinion. But now I think using it as a bed and breakfast and a hair salon we would need a separate use variance for that.
Correct.
The bed and breakfast are
If it's going to be used for something that's more of a retail type use like that, you would have to have a use variance for that.
Yeah, if they were to use it to live in, I think if anything, that's a positive, to your point, because even then, even outside the aspect of the small business owner, I think when you are owning a home and living there, you're going to take care of it actually probably better than if it's just solely a business, because it's actually where you're going to be dwelling and living.
Yeah.
I do have a couple comments. We've already kind of discussed the hair salon only aspect of it. We also have the right to add conditions. I mean, can we put
Correct.
conditions in there? And I'll ask you, of hours of like 8 to 8 or something of that nature of a condition, only because I am sensitive to the fact of an establishment being open till 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock or something of that nature can cause some problems, so.
I think when I asked Rochelle about that, so I could put it in this proposal, and she said 8 to 6 would be her hours, but if she takes a client at 6 o'clock, sometimes her activity takes longer than, a few minutes. So they may be clients leaving there at 8 o'clock at night.
Well, I would probably propose, unless anyone else disagrees with this group, 8 to 8 like hours. So if somebody comes in at 7:15 to do a hair appointment, they would count as before 8 because they'd be there prior to that. So if it ends up taking you till 8:45, that's still fine because it's prior. I'm just trying to be sensitive to the fact of, I work downtown and sometimes you'll see hair salons open at 11:30 at night, and that's not what I think is in the plan for what Whitestown would want to be. So that's one comment I had, and the only other one I'd want to bring up for discussion would be, I know right now it seems like you're going to keep it looking like the original structure or keep the same structure besides maybe enhancing the outside as far as the vinyl is concerned, but at any point in time, have you haven't thought about bulldozing or anything of that nature, right? Yeah. Okay, because that's one thing I would always want to make sure is that it stays no matter what, even if it were to be to the point where something like that
Honestly,
had to happen.
they're paying a small fortune for the house, so that's
Okay.
not. Yeah.
I'm just very keen on that because again, I would hate to have all of a sudden for some reason it gets torn down and like a strip mall like structure gets put up. Because again, I think that would
That's
ruin.
not been part of it. Neither has a bed and breakfast, though. That's just really my.
Ab living.
Yeah.
Okay.
As far as the hours, Jonathan,
Yeah, I think if I understand what you're saying, your suggestion is that the hours of operation, and we're defining hours of operation to mean when you are accepting appointments or walk-ins, there may be walk-ins, would begin no earlier than 8 a.m. and end no later than 8 p.m.
Assuming that does not hurt their business.
In terms of when the appointment commences, when it starts.
When it starts.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. I just want to make sure there's not lines out at 6:30 in the morning, or like I said, late at night. People are stopping by at 10:30. I don't get my hair cut or anything like that at 10:30 at night, but just to make sure I got that covered. So, so I would propose an 8 to 8.
You certainly can do that. That's a reasonable condition. Obviously, we have a lot of people that come and talk to us about what kind of hour of operation conditions can we put on various uses. This one's different, for example, than when we're talking about industrial uses, and we don't have a tenant. We have an actual tenant who's agreeing to that. So I'm okay with that as a reasonable condition. And we can craft language, assuming if what I just said was accurate, we can make sure the language meets that intent, which is no appointments prior to 8 a.m. and no appointments
sounds
after
like
8
as a
p.m.
customer, the owner or an employee can come in before
Absolutely.
a customer, not before.
If they're doing
Yep.
accounting work afterwards, no one's going to say you need to leave. Or that nature. So.
Yep.
One last comment I'd like to make is just to make sure that everyone is aware that we have it on record that we do have an email from Christina Stewart, and since Christina wasn't unable to make it, I'll go ahead.
Failing tonight.
You're fine. I'll go ahead and read the email. Hello to the planning committee. My name is Christina Stewart, and I own Christina's Salon at 120 South Main Street in Whitestown. I'm writing to you about the petition BZA 21009UV 202 South Main Street. I support Mrs. Rochelle Robinson Campbell on her petition to put in a hair salon. She has a church on the south side of her and an insurance business on the other side. I have messaged Rochelle and hope you will allow the variance. Thank you, Christina Stewart.
Just for the good of the record, I know Ms. Fisk spoke, but we also do have an email from her. I don't think we need to read it because she read her comments, but the email will be in the record of the hearing.
Yep.
Yes, I will hold it up in record. We did receive the email as well from Ms. Fisk.
That's a good call. I didn't know if the public comment also covered it, but thank you.
One other just brief sort of housekeeping piece while we're doing housekeeping. If it is the board's intent to approve this with conditions, there was one item, it's in the staff report. I didn't hear it read when, and it may have been, I just didn't hear it, but just to be clear that item 3 in the staff recommendation on findings, the need for the variance does, it says in the report, does not, should say does arise from some condition peculiar to the property involved because the site in question and structure are typical of other residential uses in the surrounding area. It's just so if you approve it, we have the 5 necessary findings.
Thank you, Jonathan.
One other comment, I guess, is a question for you, Jill. In the staff report, there was a comment about future signage being reviewed and approved by the building and planning department, and I heard him say that. Is staff requesting that be a specific condition on the use?
No, that is typical and standard. It was just more of a note that it is in there and the applicant will comply with those.
So we don't need that. We don't need anything for paving because that's included as part of our normal requirements. And then renovations obviously require building permits, so we don't need those as conditions.
Correct.
Right? Okay.
Would any,
So essentially, you have another question. I'm
I
sorry.
had one other question. Would any of this then have to go through like a development plan stage or anything like that? Okay.
If they're going to build a new structure as part of their improvement process, they'd have to go get building permits and things, and it could trigger that. But it sounds like they're going to keep the existing structure in place. So
I didn't know if the parking lot triggered that at all or anything like that.
No, that will go through our Public Works Department. They'll review it for a right-of-way permit.
So you can always make it a condition that if there's some sort of change to a structure or something, that it goes to you if you want, but it won't go to the planning commission.
So essentially, as long as we, I'd be willing to entertain a motion if we're through discussion of with the use of operating as a hair salon and the operating hours.
So moved
I
with.
entertain it. So if you would go.
All right, I'll go ahead and make a motion that we approve docket BZA 21009 UV 202 South Main Street use variance for under the conditions that it is operates as a hair salon establishment with the hours of 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. As well as the minor adjustment and approval of the staff recommendation under item 3 where it says the need for the variance does not arise, making that does arise from some condition peculiar to the property involved. That was a long motion. Is that?
That's good. Do we want to have any comment about the property can also continue to be used as a single family residence for the owner of the hair salon?
Yes.
Adopt that into the motion. If that's a friendly amendment, I think you can just adopt that.
Yeah, I'll make an amendment to the motion to have the use as a single family residence permitted as well.
I'll second.
I'll second it. All right, there's a motion and a second. And were you satisfied with all that language?
Yeah, the motion's fine. Yes.
All right. So motion second. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion passes 4-0.
Thank you.
All right, on to our next item on the agenda, the Whitestown Board of Zoning Appeals Rules and Procedures Update.
Look all the way down the lane. Jill, Lori, Brittany, and I have proposed some amendments to the Whitestown Board of Zoning Appeals Rules and Procedures. They were circulated a couple weeks ago. Happy to answer any questions. I'll give you a very high overview.
I'm sorry, Jonathan. I'm sorry, if we could have order, if you could have a conversation, if you could step out.
Sorry about that.
Thank you.
I'm just going to give a high overview of the rules and procedures and kind of generally what was changed. I'm happy to talk about any specific questions that you have. In general, as I went through this, I had my eye on a couple of things. Number one, Any part of your rules that just regurgitated state law, I opt to take those out. And it's just my preference. The reason for that, I'll give you an example. It's not in your rules, but the Plan Commission rules or rules in some communities, for example, might say something like, here's the state law on electronic meetings, and you just regurgitate it. And then the state changes the law, or the governor issues an emergency order. And then the emergency order doesn't really affect your rules, and you get into this place of, well, now we got to go back and change our rules. So my preference, where we just simply stated a law, for example, Article 3, Section 1 on quorum, we don't need to tell people what the quorum law is in the state of Indiana. We'll just accept the state's law. And if at some point the state says a quorum is now 2 members instead of 3, or instead of 4, then we'll accept that, right? Or 3, whatever the rules are. So that's an example of that. I removed things that I thought were unnecessary. Staff recommended that we remove some signage requirements that are not required by state law. And then we tried to tighten up just other provisions. Another example of a change that we made because of COVID is in Article 12. The town of Whitestown adopted rules, the council did, that technically apply to all boards and commissions, but it allows you to either adopt them or adopt your own if you want. That Article 12 will adopt the Whitestown Town Council's emergency or electronic meeting rules, which we have already been following anyway. So it's not a change the way you're doing business. It's just specifically adopting it into your rules. I did have a question from the president on a couple of changes that I'm happy to make if it's the will of the board. And there's no obligation you adopt these whenever. These are just for you to consider and say, yeah, we want to adopt these.
To read them or explain them?
What's that?
You want me to read my comments?
I'll tell them what they are.
Okay.
If you disagree, let me know. But first is on page 3, Article 5, Section 2. So a little background on this. We kind of tried to tighten up the procedure for public comment on items not on the agenda. My recommendation, just to be real frank, is that you take that out entirely. The only reason that's my recommendation is you're really a judicial body. I was telling the president when we were coming in, you know, when you go to court, you don't have, the judge doesn't say, anybody here want to complain about things that have nothing to do with why we're here today. So you don't need to have that. Other boards before Whitestown have it. It's totally fine to have it. It's a good idea to let people speak, so I don't have an objection to letting it happen. That was just my recommendation. The president recommended that we increase that time available to the same that would be, in case there's a lot of people that want to come. I think he requested that go up to 20 minutes and that the people be allowed to speak for a maximum of 3, which would just mirror the petitions.
And just for my information, if we leave it as it is and we have a big turnout, we as a board can extend that.
You have the discretion to suspend your rules. It's in the rules on out right now. You don't have to have that rule in there, but you do. You can suspend your rules and say we'd like to allow people to continue to speak. Yeah.
But we can still put, say, a limit of 3 minutes per person or whatever.
Yep, or the president could say, we typically have a limit of 20 minutes unless there's an objection from the board. I'm just going to let people speak. Or he can say, time's up and gavel it. So I think that's totally up to you, but that was one of his suggestions. Then the other is on, I forget what section, is it on page 6? Page 6,
Yes.
Which is Article 8, Section 3.
Yep.
State law says that whenever we have to, as a board, we have to define who are the interested parties that get notification. But the state law says, here's how you notify those people. And we allow certified mail as notice, as well as publishing. The state law says it must be at least 10 days. We've adopted the minimum, which is at least 10 days. Or that's what we've had in the past. And the president requested that we move that to 14 days. I think as a result of just mail lag times. I'm totally fine with that if that's what you would like to do. So Section 2 would still be 10 days for the notification in the newspaper, but notification by mail on number 3 would be 14 days.
John, if I can step in, staff would not like to go to 14 days just with staff review time, the ability to get the applications in, and then the mailing times. That would put them at having to reach out to the newspaper about 3 weeks in advance. And so that gives us 3 days to review. So I would say just
would you say
keep
the same for mail notice? Because he's just talking about mail notice. The
just
newspaper,
mail.
He's okay with 10. I don't know. And I told him we'd have to check with staff.
Yeah, I can explain the mail. We'll take this past what was on our agenda today. So if we leave it at 10 days. So what they could have mailed it Monday of last week, correct? Postmarked. If you mail it on that Monday, Thanksgiving's a holiday, there's no mail. You take out Sunday. It to me, it's paring down those number of days. You're talking best case scenario, first class mails, 2 days now, and that's best case. So now you're paring almost down to 6 days of someone to review something. So that's why my suggestion is the 14 days. It gives 4 more days of to try to address those things that are out of the town's control, the mail.
Okay.
And,
Yeah.
and Jill, you want to give a little, just because we out here don't really know what goes in behind the scenes. So a petitioner comes and says, I want to make this petition. What does staff do in terms of getting that petitioner ready to send out notice and get notices published? What's your process, and what kind of lead time do you need?
Yeah, so we typically review it and we'll let them know if there's anything that they need to fix before that time, before they actually send out the mailings and newspaper publication. And it is the applicant then that's doing all these mailings and publications. So in their brains, it's easy to have 10 and 10 rather than a 10 and a 14, in my opinion. But
In terms of schedules, with our application to meeting, we're just about 5 weeks, is that right? From application deadline to actual meeting. So that goes, if you go 14 days, into that, then we're at three weeks there. So it really starts to cut down if by chance they need to continue. So they send out notice prior to knowing that they need to continue. Folks show up at a meeting and
I guess I'm not asking staff to change your internal procedures. I'm just saying that the petitioner to be able to meet these.
Correct. So it just gets really tight into that time frame, in that procedure. Yeah, obviously, yeah, it's not necessarily an issue for staff. It's really kind of timing in terms of, hey, if it needs to get pushed, and they've already sent notice, then potentially you have people showing up for a meeting that's not going to happen. Just one of the things to consider with adding those. 4 days doesn't seem like a lot.
But the example I just gave of last week
Absolutely.
for this, that's. Yeah.
So unfortunately, delays with mail also cause problems. Let me mention one more big change, and then I'll step out of the way so you guys can discuss. One more big change that I recommended, and you probably saw it in here, is in continuances. We currently require if somebody files something and they want to ask for their first continuance, they come and ask your consent. It is my experience with most boards that I represent and have done work in front of the state that we allow for an automatic continuance. So the petitioner just says, hey, we need a continuance, and it's 30 days continued. Part of the reason I suggest that for this board is if we have to get together and we often just have one item on our agenda and they want to continue it, we have a big meeting and we're all going to basically say we're okay with the continuance. So it's a recommendation. You don't have to take it, but it's just one of the recommendations that I made for this body and for the Plan Commission. So I'll step out of the way and you guys can discuss.
Question real quick. On page 5.
Yes, sir.
Section 9, attendance.
Uh-huh.
I see talks about C Article 2, Section 4, removal of members.
And that may have been removed. That section I think was removed, but let me check.
Okay. I didn't see Article 2, Section 4.
Yeah, so that section should be deleted. That line should be deleted out of the rules. Good catch. There used to be a rule in here about how members are removed, and that is as provided by law. So that's one of the sections that I removed. I just missed the cross reference to it. So, those who fail to appear at meetings may be subject to removal from the WBZA. There should be a period there, and see Article 2, Section 4 should be deleted. Just so that folks are aware, the state law is if you miss 3 meetings in a row without notice, that is cause for your removal from the board. And that's just what the state law is. So no reason to have it in your rules.
Just a quick clarification on the definition of days. Is that that's calendar days, correct? Not business days. Okay.
Everything that's in here is calendar days.
Awesome. Thank you.
want to discuss, I can start off with one.
Yeah.
Play a little devil's advocate here on the Article 5, Section 2 for the public comment. I'm all for hearing people talk, but when these aren't related to the agenda, do we open ourselves up for people just to come in and rant off topic? And really, is that the place to allow them to do it here? Whereas I feel like if they have a problem, they can do it, there's various means they can do it and not utilize our meeting as a way to do that.
And there's a longer allotment of time in the town council for items not related to the agenda, or is this the same amount of time that's for town council?
I'm not for certain on that, but
Okay.
I believe it's the same amount of time for planning
Okay.
commission.
But to kind of build on that too, I could see people who aren't super familiar with the process and they look at the agenda and or the meeting schedule and they're going, I don't know what meeting I need to go to address this problem. So I think it might be a good idea to leave a little bit of time in there, whether it be 5 minutes. That way somebody has the ability to come in and say, hey, I have this problem. And if it's something that, maybe we can just give them some advice on what direction they need to go with it.
I'll meet y'all in the middle. I think maybe 10 minutes is reasonable, which would give 2 minutes.
Let's say Philip convinced me here, so I'll concede my comment.
Okay, all right. I'm just trying to play the middle. All right. So, I mean,
I'll retract my comment.
I think with the fact that we can extend it, having that ability to be able to extend it, I think that gives us the additional leeway if we needed and we thought it was pertinent.
Yeah, and the other reason why I bring it up is just we're such a niche board. It'd be different if the town council, right? That's something where you're like, hey, this is how the town's getting ran.
Right.
This is such a niche board that if you have a problem and you're in front of us, you're most likely, because it's an agenda item.
And we only have a meeting if there's even a request for a variance.
Right. Yeah.
And then you're going to oppose that variance or want that variance, and you'll speak to that during that section. So,
I had one other question on that. If you have an item that is, say, continued, can the public still speak on that? Does that fall under the agenda items, or would that fall under something that's not on the agenda?
So this happens from time to time, particularly at Plan Commission. And usually what the president will say at that meeting is that item's now been removed from the agenda. It will not be until next month's agenda. If you signed up to speak on that, we would request that you come back to the next meeting. That's usually what we say. Andrew and I were talking about that on our way in. It's sort of I don't know, it's not on the agenda anymore, but that's usually what we say. And usually people then are happy to know they can come back and speak another time and they leave. At the same time, if somebody's come to the meeting and they can't come to the next one and they want to speak, I would advise the board it's better to let people speak than to tell them they can't. So it just sort of depends on individual situation. But that's typically how it's handled, and usually people who have signed up to speak, once the items are moved, they're happy that it's not going to be approved tonight and they leave. That's what happens.
I'd just like to personally say this is probably, for the most part, around these parts goes unnoticed, but I'd like to say thank you for continuing to keep the Pledge of Allegiance in the petition hearing procedures, because I know that there's some towns and boards out there that are choosing to remove that, and I think that that's just frankly un-American. So I just want to say thank you for keeping it in there. That's all.
So I guess these can continue to be discussed. They do need to have a vote if you would like to change, if you'd like to approve them. The one change I did note in here was the one that Mr. Pascarella indicated to delete out of section Article 6, Section 9, that last little part there that said see Article 2, Section 4, which no longer exists. And then I know there were the other two items. We're not going to change the procedure on public comment, and then there was discussion about the notice, but I don't know if there was a final decision on that. What's the pleasure of the board? Do you want to continue to think about them for until the next meeting? I don't know if we'll have a meeting next month or not, or do you want to?
I'm comfortable with making a motion, but
What's the rest of the time?
I guess I'll give my opinion. Personal opinion, I would prefer my other comment or suggestion or change is that notification by mail be adjusted to 14 calendar days. That one I do feel a little more strongly about. Sorry. And if if staff would choose, if you would want signage to be changed to 10, or sorry, notification by newspaper to 10 to match it, if that's easier to communicate, but I'm not suggesting by newspaper, I'm just suggesting notification by mail be altered to 14 days.
Yes, I have a hard time on that one just because what the staff are telling me is it could put some burden, but I also understand your point of view that mail is getting slower. Is it possible that this could be amended just solely by itself if we start to see an issue from a mailing perspective? Or I guess in certain circumstances, could we, maybe during the holidays, could we, I guess, make an amendment to this that during those specific times where we could run into this? Or is that getting too specific?
Before you answer that, I mean, there's holidays throughout the year, like
Yeah.
post
Yeah.
office observes Columbus Day.
Right, right.
That there's no mail on, so I guess I would debate back that it's holidays throughout the year, not just November and December.
I think from a perspective of just reading the rule and trying to interpret it, trying to write a rule that would carve out when you have longer than 10 days and when not is difficult.
Yeah.
The reason the rules are written the way they are for BZAs with respect to mailing notice versus some other provisions of the law where you have to receive notice by a certain date is the onus is on the petitioner to provide notice, not to make sure that the person opens and receives the notice, right? So we're not, if somebody decides they don't want to get their mail, that's on them. That would be a way to kind of handle what you're talking about, but that would go against what state law kind of the default is. And just to identify, there is a legal understanding of why we would have why we would require 10 days for newspaper, because that's a date. You have to be published 10 days before the meeting. We know that it's out there. What you're saying with the mail, the concern is when it arrives, right? And I get that. There are a lot of places now that are kind of trying to push more electronic notice too, but then, then you're putting the onus on property owners to make sure they're checking the town Facebook page or things like that. So no matter how you do it, trust me, people will complain. You'll never get it right, but that's really up to the board what you want to do and how upset you want to make staff.
Because this is what I deal with most of the time. The majority of petitioners usually submit before the deadline. As an example, I looked up tonight because I knew he was super early. I know that the remonstrators' comments didn't reflect that, but all of his mailings were postmarked for the docket tonight on November 9th.
And sorry, I wasn't trying to single out tonight. I was just
yeah,
calendar wise.
totally, yeah, no, but I
wasn't
just,
trying to single out the
no,
petitioner.
totally, but I just, as a fresh in my mind example, but most of them don't wait until the last minute and usually get them to the required people before the 10 days.
I like the electronic, but I get somebody could complain if they don't have internet access.
And unfortunately, the state law hasn't fully adopted a uniform way of electronic notification, although it's coming because we're running out of newspapers too. Right? We're going to have a central repository at some point, just don't have it yet.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely appreciate the proactiveness on, U.S. Postal Service and having their issues. I just struggle to fix another administration's problem and putting potential undue burden on the staff and petitioner. I guess that's just where I'm at. Kind of one of those, if it's not broke currently, don't fix it. And I feel like we could address it later if we maybe start to see it to become an issue. If that's something that's always an option to bring it back and just make it an additional amendment, or.
So one other note, just as a way to handle it as a board, that may be a middle ground rather than having any rules, is if we have a situation, let's say the petitioner here hadn't sent notice until exactly 10 days before the meeting, and people were complaining and saying, I didn't get the notice until yesterday, the board certainly could take it on its own to say, given the notice was adequate under the law, but given that people really have enough time to consider it, we'd like to continue the matter. So you certainly could handle it that way as well. That'd be on a case-by-case basis. That would be a way that you could
That's one way. Let me ask this, have we had anyone complain about 10 days?
It was in the email tonight. One of the emails said, send a letter a week of Thanksgiving holidays stating December 2nd, city planners holding a hearing is absurd. So there's one just before us
And
tonight.
I'll
We
just
have-
be
we
clear
have-
again, I was not focusing
But
on
I know you
that.
weren't focusing tonight.
I'm just going looking at the calendar. Not
There have never, I've gone to Board of Zoning Appeals meetings across the state, and uniformly, when there's a big, heavy issue, people complain about the fact that they didn't know about it early enough. But that's just the nature of when you're going to require people to provide notice a year in advance. We're going to
Yeah, I
sit on
was
these
gonna say,
things
so
forever.
if we did 14 or 10, you'd still probably have the same.
Yeah, people are still going to complain. You're not going to fix that issue of people being upset about the time that they have notice of. No one will ever be happy. But if the question is, I think what the president's trying to identify as mail is slow.
Right.
It's probably slower now than it was even a year or 2 years ago. But I think what staff's saying is they're concerned about the pressure put on them. And so one of the middle ground thoughts you could have here is just to say, we noticed your notice was postmarked on December 24th, and nobody got the mail till January the 8th, and we're having a meeting on the 9th. What the heck? Like, why did you do that? Let's continue this.
That was going to be one of my questions. Does the petitioner, do they provide proof that they mailed it? Is that what they have to do?
Yes, they provide a certified mailing to us. Yes.
So is that something that could be included in the packet that's sent out to us prior to the meetings?
We can start to include a time of when they did mail it.
Yeah.
Yes.
In that
can
way,
include that.
at least coming into a meeting, if it's really, like it's been stated, if it was really close to the deadline, that may be something that we need to take into account, because right now we don't know, if it was sent 10 days before, if it was sent 20 days before.
Mm.
Yeah,
What about?
think
I just thought of something else. What about 12 days? That satisfies if there was even 2 holidays and like Christmas Day, like the example Jonathan just gave. You're laughing at me now.
No, I'm not. Middle ground. We're trying to find a middle ground. We're all looking for middle ground.
But you have Christmas and New Year's Day. There you go. There's 12 days. There's the 2 days, 2 holidays in that time period.
But if we have the power to continue to the next board meeting because of that issue,
You do.
I mean, maybe that's the answer, is that if someone comes up, if there's a bunch of people who are coming up saying legitimately, like, I just got this 2 days ago, and I haven't had time to prepare, then that one would continue to the next board meeting.
Yeah, I think with an alternative like that, it's hard to change, my opinion. That's what the voting's for. So,
And I would, just to be clear, I would kind of mirror Craig's sentiment that given that we have avenues and options, if we see an issue, we can either continue it to the next meeting so that we can make sure that people have had enough time to get their mail. I would be inclined to leave it at the 10 days.
If we see this be a persistent issue, then we can move it.
Yeah.
I guess with that, I'll go ahead and just make a motion that we approve the Whitestown Board of Zoning Appeals Rules and Procedures amendments with the removal of in Article 6, Section 9 of the section where it says see Article 2, Section 4, removal of members, striking that out.
I'll second.
Okay, there's a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
I'm going to abstain if I can.
You can do that.
All right. I won't oppose, but abstain. Okay, motion passes 3-0.
Great. We'll get that.
Or 3-0.
We'll get that stricken and get the new rules posted online.
All right. And then I think the last item is other business and announcements. Seeing none, unless you have any surprise ones. Surprise. Number 9,
Mr. President, I'll go ahead and make a motion that we adjourn at 7:44 p.m.
Second.
All right. Motion second. All's in favor?
Aye.
Opposed. All right. Thank you.
Recording stopped.